There's a particular kind of silence that says more than any statement ever could. Not the peaceful kind. The kind where a dozen reporters ask the same question 5 different ways, and every single time the answer comes back the same. We have nothing to share at this time. That's the silence coming out of certain palace circles right now. And when an institution built on carefully worded statements suddenly goes quiet, that's usually the moment worth paying the closest attention. Have a listen.
Time now to discuss today's headline with Tim Campbell and Bryony Gordon, beautifully lit, I should say. They're starting with the royal family, who are reportedly holding an emergency summit in Balmoral to discuss Harry and Meghan's return to the UK. Bryony, you know the couple personally. How do you think their return will would it help or will it heal the royal family, do you think?
I'd hope so. We were talking about this before. I think it's really important to remember the circumstances under which Harry and Meghan felt they had to leave the UK, which was that they got married in 2018, Meghan had Archie, and she felt she couldn't deal with the hounding. I mean, she's spoken about this. She was suicidal. I spent time with her at that time, and I know that was a horrible experience for her. And, you know, he went to the royal family to ask for support, didn't get that support, and felt that he had to leave and take his wife to California. Do you know what I mean? And I think under those
safety.
Yeah, but also just to get some time away from the system. And the only way to do that was that they were told, you know, you have to become non-working royals. So, you know, people get very het up about Harry and Meghan, but if the worst you can say about them is that they sort of protected their own little family's mental health for a bit, I think, you know, let's remember here, Harry is not under investigation for misconduct in public office, as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is. And Meghan was not revealed last week to have been lobbying the director of the FBI on behalf of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's ex-girlfriend, which Sarah Ferguson was. You know, these are there's just a young family, and I think it's great to have them back. We know that Harry is there's the Invictus Games next year. So, you know, this is the other thing. Harry works so hard for this, you know, charity for wounded servicemen. And, you know, because he loves it, and he loved his, you know, time in the army. And, you know, Invictus Games was going to take place in Birmingham next year, as we know, because he did a great morning with Alison on This Morning the other week.
That's incredible.
And, you know, I think it's really lovely that they feel that they are able to come back to the UK. You know, I think that home is where the heart is. Amen. And we should be really grateful that they feel able to bring their hearts back here.
And do you think that William will forgive him?
I've got no idea. I can't speak for William, you know, but I think...
I hope so, because I think what we've got to remember is that we've got a family here. And listen, I've fallen out with family members, but at the heart of it, particularly as in his family, particularly members of the family getting older, and you've got children now who want to be part of that family. I really hope this summit focuses on rebuilding the relationships, because for all of us, we have to look at what is most important. Forget the money, forget the attention. It's all about the family. And I really hope, given that his father is getting older, given that he has children, that they really focus on healing those risks between them, because no family needs that at the heart of it.
Yeah, and the king has cancer. You know, he's getting on. We were talking about this. You know, they are a family. You know, and I remember a very wise therapist once saying to me when I was having a few issues with my own family, and I remember him saying to me, "Bryony, the thing about your family is they know how to push your buttons because they installed them, right?" And I think that works here. And I think that I would hope that at this summit they're going to sit around and they're going to remember the words of the late Queen, which was smile and wave. Smile and wave. Like there's another great bit of advice for everyone, not just Harry and William, to deal with difficult families is, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And you can only answer one. You can't be happy and right. And sometimes you've just got to bite your tongue and, you know, and let things...
Can you write that down for my wife? Because she's always happy and she's always right.
So, yeah, I think that you're happy, though, aren't you?
I'm very happy. But the fact is...
wrong.
Obviously wrong. But the fact is, I remember that in families, they can be difficult sometimes. And the reality is that I'm really lucky that most of my family life is not in the front of millions of people having conversations.
God, can you imagine? Like,
It was
if
horrible.
I was part of the royal family, I mean, I would have ended up in rehab. I mean, I'm not part of the royal family, and I ended up in rehab. And it would be horrifying.
Yeah. I think that there's bigger issues within the royal institution, but at the moment, this for me is about a family group needing to work out, what do we really want around here? Do we want to keep this rift going because we can feed it with that? Or do we want to focus on what's important, the fact that we've got family members who are growing up, family members who are getting older and not very well, and that we need to remember that we are a unit rather than anything else. That's what we've done in our family. If you acknowledge what you've done wrong, and you acknowledge that you may have hurt other individuals, and you do the most important thing, which is apologise, everything can be sorted.
You can move on.
You can move on, and I think they should, really.
Yeah, for sure. And Brian, you mentioned that they left, to protect the family unit and the health, mental or otherwise of the family unit. Security is obviously a big issue, you would think. That kind of hounding by the press and that idea that they're under scrutiny 24/7 now with 2 young kids in tow. How do they fund that level of security?
Well, Andy Burnham has said today that it's a private matter. So there's an organisation called RAVEC, which stands for the Royal and VIP Executive Committee. And they made a decision recently, it was made under the circumstances of when they were going to be infrequent visitors to the UK, that they didn't qualify for government paid for protection. They are obviously going to have to make a decision now based on these new circumstances, and I think that again, I feel like I just think it's so mean that they shouldn't be allowed protection. He was born into the royal family.
Regardless of service, he's the son of the king.
Yeah, ex-prime ministers get protection, and I'm like, what?
Even if you've done 45 days.
Yeah, and exactly.
Yeah.
And this is also, and so let's say RAVEC decide that they don't deserve publicly funded protection. The royal family are a family with vast private funds as well as access to public funds, because we know the royal finances were revealed a couple of months ago, so we know Prince William is worth over $1 billion. The king is only worth something like 640 million.
Where's that small violin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, it goes back to what you said, Tim. It's like, what matters? What's important? Harry and Meghan are not asking for someone to kind of peel grapes for them and treat them like kings and queens.
Yeah.
They're just asking to feel safe in this country. And we also know that the more we chat about this, the more it's actually quite dangerous to be talking about security. And now it puts ideas in people's hearts. So we're kind of putting whatever cost is up every time we have this discussion.
I agree, but I think the bigger thing for me is that Harry is he's served for his country. Not only in his role as a member of the royal family, but he's also done his duty within the armed forces. And I think just because they've had a disagreement as a family, we can't disregard all the great work that he's done in terms of helping wounded individuals through the Invictus Games, raising the profile of that as a cause and concern, which we know lots of transition out of the armed forces really disproportionately affects our armed forces individuals. And I think Andy Burnham, I understand why he's saying it's a private matter, but it actually isn't, because the institution is part of a political conversation. And I hope the decision is changed, because if the situation does change and he does move here, I think it should be. But to your point, if it isn't, will they pay for their own security? And I think as a member who has contributed positively to this country and is going to be a figurehead, regardless of what he does, I think he should qualify under that.
So do you think Andy was wrong?
I think Andy was making a safe statement while the decision was being made. I don't think it's about right or wrong. He's in a position of a political sensitivity, and he's had to make it before the decision has gone through a proper process.
It is a private matter in so much as that RAVEC, the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, are not going to make this decision in public in front of everybody.
Yeah, OK, rather than deal with it yourselves.
Correct.
And I think that, and I hope that the King would step in and help, but I'm sure they have access to funds. They pay for themselves in America.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Royal Truth Desk, the channel where we take the headlines apart piece by piece instead of just shouting them louder. Today, we're digging into something that's been generating a serious amount of buzz. Speculation about a possible emergency-style meeting at Balmoral, reportedly involving King Charles, Prince William, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. 4 names that, together in one room, would represent one of the most significant royal moments in years. So let's slow down and actually look at what's being said, what it might mean, and, just as importantly, what we still genuinely don't know. Location matters in royal storytelling more than people give it credit for. Balmoral isn't Buckingham Palace. It's not a place built for press conferences and official photo calls. It's private, it's remote, it's the estate the family has historically used for exactly the kind of conversations that aren't meant to happen in front of cameras. If there's any truth to reports of a serious sit-down happening there, the location itself tells you something important. This isn't about optics. Nobody stages a let's-be-seen reconciling moment at Balmoral. You go there when you actually want privacy, not the appearance of privacy. That's part of why this story has picked up so much traction. It's not built around a public appearance or a staged photo. It's built around the possibility of an actual, substantive conversation happening somewhere the tabloids can't easily reach. A lot of this conversation seems to trace back to a particularly heated discussion on This Morning, where commentators went back and forth, sometimes quite sharply, about what a Harry and Meghan return to Britain could actually look like, and whether reconciliation with William is even realistically on the table. Now, television debate segments are, by design, dramatic. That's the format. But underneath the theatrics, there was a genuinely interesting question being wrestled with. Can this family actually move past years of very public tension, or has too much been said in interviews and documentaries and books for a real reset to happen? It's worth remembering that reconciliation in real families rarely looks like what television wants it to look like. There's no dramatic musical swell, no single cathartic conversation that fixes everything. If anything is happening here, it's more likely to be slow, awkward, and largely invisible to the public, which, frankly, might be exactly the sign that it's real. You can't talk seriously about Harry potentially returning to the UK for a summit, a visit, anything, without immediately running into the security issue. This has been the single most persistent, unresolved thread in the entire Sussex saga since 2020, and it shows zero signs of quietly disappearing. This is where RAVEC comes into the picture, the committee responsible for reviewing and deciding on protective security arrangements for the royal family and other public figures. Harry's ongoing legal challenge around his security arrangements has been one of the most closely watched, most legally complex parts of this whole story, and it directly shapes how, when, and even whether he can move freely and safely in the UK. If there really is a significant meeting being discussed or planned, security logistics aren't a side detail. They're basically the foundation everything else depends on. You can't have an emergency summit if the person at the centre of it can't be safely and reliably present. So in a strange way, watching how the RAVEC situation develops might actually tell us more about whether any of this is realistic than the meeting speculation itself does. Let's poke at the word emergency for a second, because it's doing a lot of work in these headlines. Emergency implies urgency, something that can't wait, something that needs to be addressed right now, rather than through the usual slow-moving channels of royal diplomacy. What could actually create that kind of urgency? A few possibilities float around. Growing public pressure for the family to be seen resolving things ahead of major upcoming royal milestones. practical logistics around future events that require some baseline of cooperation or simply a recognition, privately among the people involved, that years of silence have started doing more damage than a difficult conversation ever could. We don't know which of these, if any, is accurate, but it's worth noting that emergency doesn't necessarily mean crisis. Sometimes it just means this has been avoided long enough, and now there's a reason it can't be avoided any further. It's easy, in all this speculation, to focus almost entirely on Harry and Meghan. They tend to dominate headlines by default. But if a meeting like this is genuinely on the table, William's presence changes the entire dynamic. The relationship between William and Harry has arguably been the most damaged, most publicly scrutinised piece of this entire family story. Statements, interviews and reported tensions have painted a picture of two brothers who went from famously close to visibly distant in a relatively short window of time. If there's any real movement toward the two of them being in the same room, let alone having an actual conversation, that's a far bigger story than a Harry and Charles reunion alone would be. And that raises an interesting question worth sitting with. Is reconciliation with the king actually the easier part of this equation? Fathers and sons, for all their complications, often find their way back to each other. Brothers who've drifted this far, with this much public history stacked between them, might be the harder relationship to rebuild, precisely because so much of it played out in public view rather than behind closed doors. Here's a name that doesn't always get centred in these conversations, but probably should. Catherine, Princess of Wales. Her own health journey over the past couple of years has understandably shifted the entire royal family's rhythm, priorities and public presence. If a significant family meeting is being discussed, her situation is almost certainly part of the calculus, even if she isn't necessarily present in the room herself. Any serious family conversation happening right now would reasonably need to account for her health, her capacity, and what feels manageable for her and William's household during this specific period. That's not a minor detail. It's likely shaping the entire timeline, tone and structure of whatever conversations may or may not be happening. It's a good reminder that these stories aren't just chess pieces moving around a board. There are real people, real health situations, and real emotional bandwidth involved. And that tends to matter more than headlines usually allow for. One of the trickiest parts of covering a story like this is the gap between sources say and confirmed. A lot of what's circulating right now sits firmly in that gap, plausible, widely reported, but not something anyone involved has stood behind on the record. That doesn't mean it's untrue. Royal reporting has a long, well-documented history of sources say stories turning out to be substantially accurate, months or years before anything gets officially confirmed. But it does mean we should hold this with open hands, rather than certainty. The most responsible thing we can do here is lay out what's being reported, explain why it's plausible, and be honest about where the reporting stops and the guesswork begins. Even if this particular meeting happens exactly as described, it's worth zooming out. One conversation, however significant, doesn't erase years of public tension, legal disputes, and deeply personal statements made in books and interviews. Relationships this complicated rarely get resolved in a single sitting, no matter how private or well-intentioned that sitting is. What a meeting like this could realistically represent is a starting point, a signal that the door isn't permanently closed, a sign that behind all the headlines and speculation there might still be enough will on both sides to try. That's not nothing. In a story defined for years by silence and distance, even the possibility of a real conversation is significant. So here's what we're keeping an eye on going forward. Any movement on Harry's RAVEC security case, since that arguably determines the practical "can this even happen" question more than anything else. Any official statements, however brief, from Kensington Palace or Buckingham Palace. And frankly, whether Harry and Meghan's own actions in the coming weeks, travel patterns, public appearances, interview choices, line up with the idea that something is genuinely shifting behind the scenes. We want to know what you think. Do you believe a meeting like this is actually happening, or is this more speculation than substance? Do you think reconciliation between Harry and William is even realistic at this point, or has too much been said publicly for that bridge to be rebuilt? And how do you think Catherine's health and William's priorities should factor into how or whether this family moves forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This channel runs on genuine discussion, not just headlines, and some of the sharpest takes we get come directly from you. If this breakdown helped you make sense of a very noisy story, go ahead and hit that like button. It makes a real difference for this channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Royal Truth Desk and turn on notifications, because if there's real movement on this story, we'll be breaking it down the moment it happens. If you'd like to support the kind of careful, independent royal coverage we do here, super thanks is always genuinely appreciated. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.